Matt Milano returned to practice. Josh Allen discussed what he's been working on this offseason. We got a bunch to react to coming out of Buffalo Bills Minicamp today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, folks, the Buffalo Bills mandatory minicamp kicked off on Tuesday, and we have plenty to reflect on, plenty of nuggets coming out of one Bills drive, including comments from Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, Terrel Bernard, Matt Milano back on the practice field. Let's get into it. I do want to start with the update that Sean McDermott provided on attendance and injuries. So first of all, we'll get to attendance. All players on the team, except Christian Benford, who was excused from practice due to a family matter, they were all in attendance. And I know the name that people were interested in was Rousseau Douglas. Of course, Rousseau Douglas over the last 3 weeks was not at the voluntary OTAs, at least on the Tuesday session that the media was able to attend. He was at the mandatory minicamp, and I think you can put any concerns that you had about maybe him holding out or having some type of dissatisfaction with his contract. You can put that to the side. He was at mandatory minicamp. Now, Sean McDermott did have a long list of players that were unable to practice on Tuesday and some players that were limited. And the list of players not practicing is pretty concerning, primarily because, once again, the Bills have a bunch of guys at the exact same position that are injured. We don't know the extent of these injuries. We know that they were not healthy enough to practice in the minicamp on Tuesday. So not practicing on Tuesday. Linebackers, Dorian Williams, Adefwan Ulafosio, Nicholas Morrow, and Baylon Spector. Running backs, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, and Reggie Gilliam. So you have a bunch of linebackers and a bunch of running backs that couldn't give it a go. Limited participants in practice were Mike Edwards, continuing to work back from the shoulder, Spencer Brown, the Bills starting right tackle, who's also has his own shoulder deal, and then Matt Milano. Now, Matt Milano being a limited participant in practice is a big deal because he practiced. He didn't do the team stuff, but you saw video of him doing individual drills, obviously not quite at full speed, but I didn't see anything restrictive about his movement patterns. And so a very encouraging situation as it relates to Matt Milano's return. And Sean McDermott discussed his return to practice and said he's going to do individual work today. We're taking it one day at a time. We're going to continue to build and ramp up. They're looking to stack days on top of each other. Obviously, he's got to go through the practice. You got to see how he responds. You have to see how he feels when he wakes up tomorrow and kind of go from there. But this is obviously a very encouraging sign for Matt Milano and his return to the lineup. And McDermott even said the hope is for him to be available when camp opens up. And so it feels like everything's on schedule. I think we'll know a little bit more based on how tomorrow goes, the Wednesday practice. But Matt Milano back in a helmet and shoulder pads running around a football field. And that was a really cool thing to see, because for all the things that you want to look at for the Bills this coming season and turnover on the offensive side of the football, new players on defense, anything, the Bills are getting back Matt Milano. And if Matt Milano is the player that we've enjoyed for so many years, that's a big deal for this defense, especially because you think about last year and what the domino effect was because Matt Milano wasn't on the field. The Bills had to reinvent how they play defense, including playing Jordan Poyer as a linebacker, dropping off Tyrel Dodson, putting Taylor Rapp as a safety. I mean, there was a lot of moving parts just because Matt Milano wasn't available. It's pretty exciting to think about that not having to be the case moving forward. So Matt Milano's return, a big deal. And I'll talk more about that later on when I get to Terrel Bernard's comments and him talking about the relationship with Matt Milano and what they've been working on this offseason and what that pair can be. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But I do want to stick with the linebacker thing here because the Bills had so many guys out. Again, linebackers that couldn't practice. Dorian Williams, Edifwan Ulofoshio, Nicholas Morrow, Baylon Spector. That's 4 guys right there. Plus, remember, Matt Milano not available for teamwork. And so the Bills were pretty limited when it comes to bodies at the position, which is kind of crazy when you consider it's a 91-man roster right now. Plus, they had 3 tryout players. The Bills had 3 guys participate in mandatory camp on a tryout basis. They were running back Hassan Hall, linebacker Stephen Hillis, and linebacker Shaq Quarterman. The interesting player there is Shaq Quarterman, a 2020 4th-round pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars out of Miami. Has played every game for Jacksonville the last 3 seasons and 12 as a rookie. So he's played a lot of football, not necessarily on defense. He hasn't started a game on the defensive side of the football, but he has logged over 900 special team snaps over the last 4 years with the Jaguars. And so another depth option potentially, again, only on a tryout basis. But special teams emphasis, which obviously with the new kickoff rule, we're all kind of curious to see how that impacts things. But also, I mean, the Bills are just trying to get through a practice. You think about it in terms of the practical application of the guys not being available for today or the Tuesday practice. Your first group of linebackers is presumably Terrel Bernard and Deion Jones in team drills. And then your second pair is like recent UDFA signings, Joe Andreessen and Shane Simon. And then it's the tryout guys and Shaq Quarterman and Stephen Hillis. I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy how the Bills can have such a high concentration of injuries at one position. And that's not even getting into running back, where James Cook is healthy and then his primary backups, Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, can't give it a go. So what, Frank Gore? UDFA is RB2, Darrington Evans? I mean, good for those guys to get these opportunities, but you want your preferred options to be available. Again, we don't know the extent of these injuries. We just know that they couldn't practice on Tuesday. All right, let's get into some more of Sean McDermott's comments, and then obviously we'll get to what Josh Allen said and Terrel Bernard and some of the practice updates. But Sean McDermott was asked about Chase Claypool, and I feel like this continues to be a buzzy name. And look, I'll buy the hype when it's appropriate to buy the hype, which is camp, which is preseason, when there's pads on, all of that. But at this point in time, right, you want to hear positivity about players, and that continues to be the case with Chase Claypool. Sean McDermott called him a good addition, discussed his experience not only as an offensive player, but on special teams, which is going to be important for him to be part of this mix. He said Claypool's done all that we've asked him to do at this point. He's been a good teammate. He's been focused. He's made plays, and they're happy to have him. On Gable Steveson, the wrestler turned football player, this is the first time Sean McDermott has commented on that. This is what he said. He said, I'm a big believer in wrestlers and the skills developed and how it transfers to football, especially for the offensive and defensive line. For him, it's about daily improvement. The quickness, burst, and power were easy to identify from the workout. And then you listen to Gable Steveson talk about the opportunity after practice, and he sounds really motivated. He said, look, I'm not doing this to just give it a try. I want to do it and make it. I want to be an example for other people who aspire to play football and maybe never have and do it at the highest level. He seems highly motivated. So that's obviously going to continue to be a fun story to track. And then Sean McDermott was asked about the biggest thing that he's looking to kind of take away from the offseason into the break into camp. And it's interesting. He said, the biggest thing is the health of the football team. And obviously that's not off to a great start right now with the injuries that I already discussed. And we'll get to it, but Khalil Shakir got injured in practice. He said the health of the football team, we got to get through the next couple of days and into the break period and have guys available. Guys need to stay healthy over the break. We also have to make sure that schematically we're developing our menu. We have to try things and have a good idea of what that menu should be come camp time and making sure that it aligns with the skills of the players. Then at camp, it's all about repping that. So they're developing their scheme, getting familiar with their players and what they can do, what they can't do, figuring out what they want to be offensively and defensively. But obviously the health of the football team is at the forefront. And right now it doesn't feel like that's trending in a good direction, which that's not the conversations I want to be having right now with you, candidly. I don't want to be talking about all these guys being injured and, all these other guys getting reps as a silver lining. I want the Bills to be healthy. And that's been a problem for this team over the last couple of years after several years of very good injury luck. So whatever's got to happen here to have this team healthy, to give itself its best opportunity to be successful, boy, oh boy, do I want to see that in a big way. And unfortunately, it doesn't feel like we're off to a good start. All right, we'll get to more from Sean McDermott and some of the practice updates, including Khalil Shakir getting injured. We'll break all that down for you here on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. Folks, the NFL schedule has been released. We're all excited about it. So many big games, especially for the Buffalo Bills. Maybe you want to get to some of those games. Well, if you do, download the Game Time app. Game Time is the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. The app is awesome. It's easy to navigate. They specialize in last-minute tickets. They give you a seat view so you know exactly what to expect when you get the venue. Also, when you buy a ticket from Game Time, they send it straight to your phone, so you don't have to dig through emails to find it. But my favorite thing about Game Time is the all-in prices. You see the all-in price from the beginning of the purchase. That way, there's no surprise fees coming at the end. You know exactly what you're paying from the outset. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's get to a few more comments made by Sean McDermott. He was asked about the edge rushers and Greg Rousseau and AJ Epenesa specifically as guys that are going to be relied upon to be the go-to pass rushers. Sean McDermott said they've flashed in high-level moments. Now it's about being full-time guys and taking that next step and elevating to another level. They are aware of that. They are working hard, and that's the opportunity that is right in front of both of them. Interesting that McDermott very intentionally lumped in AJ Epenesa into this conversation. I think your starting defensive ends are going to be Rousseau and Epenesa, which I don't think is very surprising, but Von Miller's still part of the mix. I think they're going to try to have Von Miller more in that Leonard Floyd role from last year, where Leonard Floyd, aging player, still very effective for the Bills, but he played the fewest amount of snaps of his career last year for the Bills, and a lot of those snaps very intentionally pass down snaps. I think that's going to be the Bills' best chance to get what's left out of Von Miller. And through that, you need someone to command a lot of playing time, and that guy's surely AJ Epenesa. Of course, DeJuan Smoot factors in here as well. But Sean McDermott, very candid about AJ Epenesa and the opportunity to be a full-time guy. On Taylor Rapp, Sean McDermott had some pretty direct comments here. He said, Taylor Rapp is taking control of the safety room. Pause. That's a big deal. Taylor Rapp, from Sean McDermott's mouth, is taking control of the safety room. He understood his role last year. It's a new role this year. He's asserted himself from a leadership and communication standpoint. And he said, next to him, who's it going to be? Taylor Rapp is absolutely looked at as the guy in the safety room right now. Sean McDermott continue to say that Mike Edwards hasn't practiced. This is Taylor Rapp's room. And that's exciting and concerning all at once. It's concerning because I don't think he was awesome last year. I thought he was below average. I thought he did play his best football later in the season, but took him some time to get there. I liked him a lot at Washington. I liked him a lot for the Rams. Was hopeful to see a little bit more. And I think when you consider him starting off as this like third safety playing in the box, transitioning into this sub-package safety playing in deep alignments, it probably wasn't the best opportunity for him to be the best version of himself. So hopefully a more traditional role, and it being year 2 in Buffalo unlocks more of Taylor Rapp. But you can listen to Sean McDermott and realize that the opportunity is pretty big for Taylor Rapp to be, a 100% of the snaps player and key piece of this defense. On Damar Hamlin, he said he's playing more consistent and at a high level. He's very focused, working himself into a good spot. He knows the defense, and Damar's getting back to playing detail-oriented and fast. So I think another silver lining in this entire conversation with Mike Edwards not being available to this point has been Damar Hamlin and his experience on the team. And I think putting last year behind him, where such an unusual circumstance coming out of the injury and how famous he became and the mental side of probably getting back into pads and playing football again, I think Damar Hamlin's going to be positioned a lot better this year to factor into this mix. But good competition at safety. We'll see. I think when Mike Edwards gets back in there, I think it's going to be his job to lose, but we'll see what type of noise Cole Bishop can make. We'll see what type of noise Damar Hamlin can make. On the offseason structure, this is the last thing I'll mention with Sean McDermott. And if you're not familiar, there's been some buzz out there about the players wanting the offseason program to look a lot different. And Sean McDermott said, I like the current structure. He's always open to change if it works out for everyone. He said it would be hard to please everyone if you're going to move things around, but also ultimately said, I trust the people who are going to make the decision to make the right choice. But you could tell Sean McDermott wasn't too keen on shifting around the offseason program. Obviously, it's very beneficial for the players, right? They want it to look a little bit differently. They don't care too much about what the coaches and executives have going on. And of course, the coaches and executives want it to work best for them and their own family dynamics. And I think Sean McDermott was kind of concerned about, making sure that you do have some rest in there for the coaches, which, I expect him to represent those interests well. But there's definitely some momentum here, and I'm curious to see what comes of this and how the off seasons potentially look different in future years. All right, let's get into a couple of the practice reports here. These come courtesy of Alex Brasky of the Batavia Daily News. And one general takeaway, it doesn't, you could read all the different reports out there, whether it's been last week or today, you're not getting the sense that the offense is really clicking. There's been some continuing offensive struggles. Even Josh Allen was asked about it during his press conference after practice, and asked if he was frustrated. He's like, no, I'm not frustrated. We're playing football. We're trying things out. We're learning each other. That's what this time of year is for, which is true. But also, typically offenses are behind defenses at this point. So as we work through camp this week, as we get to training camp, don't be surprised that there's offensive struggles, especially when you're talking about the amount of turnover that this team has on the offensive side of the football. Meanwhile, implementing a lot of new schematic elements. I don't know if that's a word, schematic elements. So yeah, you expect there to be some bumps along the way. So I wouldn't overly panic there. I think the Bills are going to be just fine. Now, if there is something to panic about, it's that Khalil Shakir sustained an injury. This is what Alex Brasky posted on X. He said Khalil Shakir sustained an apparent injury near the beginning of team drills at Bills' Tuesday mandatory minicamp. Shakir went to make a catch during 7-on-7 and came down hard as the pass fell incomplete. Trainers tended to him. Then later he left the practice field. Elena Getzenberg described it as a lower body injury. Hope that's a bunch of nothing, because you think about playmakers for this offense, it's Khalil Shakir, it's Dalton Kincaid, it's James Cook. Those guys got to be available. And so hopefully, again, this is a bunch of nothing, but monitoring his status the rest of the week will be interesting. Obviously, you feel like the Bills will be cautious with this no matter what. Obviously, you'd love to hear that he's practicing tomorrow and everything's fine. But now this is something we got to have at the forefront of our minds moving forward until we know the severity of what's going on with Khalil Shakir. The other practice report that I want to kind of dive into. And again, we don't get much out of these, and I don't think you should really put too much into the practice reports. Again, you're talking about guys in shoulder pads and helmets. It's not full contact. There's not that much that you could really glean from it. But I thought it was interesting in reading through the various practice reports, particularly from Alex Brasky, the amount of different receivers that were targeted in team drills from Josh Allen at quarterback. And I'm guessing with Khalil Shakir getting injured during the early portions of practice, that opened up some reps for other guys. But here's one line. Kaiir Elam intercepted Josh Allen on a pass intended for Tyrell Shavers during Bills minicamp. And of course, later on, Shavers slipped and fell. And Kaiir Elam was able to pick it off. But Tyrell Shavers getting first team run. Another practice report. KJ Hamler dropped the pass from Josh Allen in team drills. KJ Hamler's getting first team reps. Another one. Andy Isabella caught a pass from Josh Allen in 2 minutes. So you know the usual suspect. I'm sure Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Chase Claypool and Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman. But also, I mean, we're going into the Tyrell Shavers, Andy Isabella, KJ Hamler bucket here. This is a real wide open thing. My suspicion, and I've said it, and I'll say it again, I think the Bills want to roster 6 receivers, and I think they'd love for their names to be Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins, Chase Claypool, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Curtis Samuel. I think those would be the 6 guys they'd like to roster, but those opportunities are going to be earned, and feels like everyone's getting a real chance to be part of the mix, which is exactly the way that it should be with the Bills' approach and, of course, where we're at in this offseason. All right, on the other side of it, I want to get into what Josh Allen said his primary focus has been this offseason. It's pretty fascinating. And also what Terrel Bernard said about the return of Matt Milano and what they're going to be as a duo. So be sure to stick with me. One of my favorite parts of every offseason is the moment where Josh Allen is asked what he's been working on this offseason. And then Josh Allen usually is pretty candid and gives a great answer. That happened for us on Tuesday. And he was asked, all right, what are you working on? What's been your main focus on what you want to improve this offseason? And boy, oh boy, am I excited to hear what Josh Allen said. He said, big time on mechanically becoming as efficient as possible. He said they're digitally mapping throwing motions and seeing what can be tightened up. Josh said he wants to be as clean as possible with how he delivers the ball. He talked about how his arm motion was getting a little bit long, that his stride was getting a little bit long, and just kind of being more aware of where he's holding the ball and release points. Those are great things for Josh Allen to say for a number of reasons. I think I'll start with this is why I think it's really important. Oh gosh, there's so much going through my mind. Let's start here, actually. Josh Allen's had some injuries over the last couple of seasons. Elbow, right, 2 years ago, shoulder this past season. And through that, you are going to adjust your mechanics throwing the ball to offset maybe where you have deficiencies due to injuries as you're trying to play through them, right? So your normal rigidly ripped mechanics can become different and altered, and they will become different and altered because you're compensating for the injury. So Josh Allen getting back into the lab and working on those things to kind of re-solidify some of that stuff is exactly what he needs to be doing. So that's huge. Number 2 is, if you remember what led to that big breakout year in 2020, where he went from, I think this guy's okay in 2019. You remember the 10-6 year, losing to Houston in the playoffs. You're like, all right, I feel like this guy might be pretty good. When he went from that to, oh my God, this is one of the elite players in the NFL in 2020, what did he do? He digitally mapped his throwing motion and figured out his mechanics. So yeah, I like going back to that for sure. So those are my 2 leading points that I want to make with this emphasis of Josh Allen. But then there's other stuff here. And it's not hard to watch. I mean, you've watched Josh Allen just like I've watched. A lot of times in those quick rhythm throws, schemed throws, Josh Allen can be really funky with how the ball comes out. And these are really short throws, and sometimes the ball comes out low and it dies on him, or it just comes off his hand weird and it might be a little high, or it's a perimeter screen and he's got to lead the running back or the receiver to space, and that receiver's going to have to work back behind him to get the football. Josh Allen's an awesome football player, but he's not above criticism. And one of my criticisms for Josh Allen has been that quick game operation, how the ball comes out, the timing, the placement. These things are going to help with that. And it sounds like Josh, he said big time mechanically becoming as efficient as possible, digitally mapping, throwing motion, seeing where it can be tightened up. He wants to be as clean as possible with how he delivers the football. That's absolutely necessary, especially because those types of throws became more a point of emphasis when Joe Brady took over the offense. So how can Josh Allen execute this style of offense better? It's that. So again, how he's had to adjust mechanics naturally due to deficiencies due to injuries over the last couple of seasons where he's had throwing shoulder and throwing elbow injuries. The fact that this is exactly what contributed majorly to his breakout in 2020, but then also how he can function more efficiently in areas where you feel like it's kind of easy stuff. But for Josh Allen, it's, he plays the game a little bit differently. And I think it's good that he's taking that opportunity to get better at, I don't want to call it the dink and dunk, but getting that ball out quickly, efficiently, giving his weapons a real chance as he's trying to become a facilitator at times for this offense in terms of what it wants to be moving forward. So that was my big takeaway from Josh Allen. From Terrel Bernard, obviously, he commented a lot about the return of Matt Milano, and we're all excited about this idea of 58 and 43 next to each other. I think it could be a really special pair. I think it has a potential to be one of the elite pairs of linebackers in the NFL. And when asked about it, because of course he returned to practice and you got to see video of Terrel Bernard and Matt Milano kind of doing drills alongside each other, you got a glimpse. And we saw it for what, 4.5 games. And my goodness, were those guys awesome against Miami and Washington. They were unbelievable. The Raiders, remember that interception that Milano had against the Raiders? This guy's a dog out there, man. You get these guys back together, guys that can take away the football, that can run and chase and cover. This is what you're looking for. So Terrel Bernard on Matt Milano, he said, "We have been working all offseason, improving our communication and our bond. We're making sure we see things the same way." He said his love and feel for the game is felt by everybody around him. These guys are you can tell they're aware. They know what they can be as a pair. And that duo can be special. And you think about having two guys that thrive in space, that can really cover distances and be effective cover players and have a good feel for what's going behind them and working laterally and in a pedal to disrupt throwing lanes. And it could be a really good group. And one of my main praises for Terrel Bernard, I think you watched him play last year, he's a good football player. But the fact that he was able to do that without Matt Milano for all but 4.5 games, to do that without Daquan Jones, the nose tackle, for a large part of the season, he was able to really, really be effective. And so with Terrel Bernard now being more experienced and having Matt Milano back next to him with a healthy Daquan Jones, and as I talked about on the first podcast that I dropped on Tuesday, there's no doubt in my mind that the defensive tackle depth is better, particularly when it comes to a-gap defender, right? Nose tackle, Austin Johnson being part of the mix, who I think could probably start for a lot of teams. I'm excited. I am excited for Terrel Bernard and Matt Milano. So there you have it. Plenty of takeaways coming out of the opening session of mandatory Bills minicamp, and we'll have more of that coming for you tomorrow afternoon. So make sure you don't miss anything. Make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.